And we're live. Here we are. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Leadership Studio. I am here today with my friend and colleague, Kate Arms. And our topic, I'm excited about this topic. Our topic is stories of transformative leadership training. But before we do that, Kate, I would love for you to introduce yourself because you're going to do so much better at this than I will. So take it away.
Yeah, so my name is Kate Arms, and for a very long time, the only label that I would accept sort of placed on me was Kate, and that gets just as complicated when it comes to what I do professionally as it does about describing who I am as a human being. My training is in coaching and art and in leadership in terms of governance structure and in terms of soft skills. And so mostly I do coaching and consulting in the space of how do we get better at collaborating and having organizations and individuals that are all thriving.
Whew, I love that. And it's so important, right? Particularly as we move into this world that is more and more uncertain, that has more and more crises associated with it, right? Like it's really, really important that like the word that pops up when you describe that work is healing.
Yeah. And it's so easy to get trapped in, I'm trying to make people happy and healthy, and I'm not really paying attention to the systems, or I'm trying to make the system effective and I'm less concerned about how the people in it are doing. And I've always been really interested in like, how do we make both of those things that we're trying to go for at the same time?
Well, and not to be too pithy, but I think that the word leadership probably is important in that, which,
it's kind of crucial.
It's a good thing that's what we're here to talk about. So the thing that I forgot to mention too is, if you're joining us on LinkedIn or YouTube and you're joining us live, of course, you can participate in this conversation by using the comments. And we'll see them, and we can have some back and forth that way as well. But before we do that, I'm going to bring it back up. I put the banner down too quickly. Let's get picky about our title. You want to do that?
Sure.
Like stories of transformative leadership training. And we talked about this before we turned the camera on. So what's what do we mean? Like, what transformative leadership training? Like, what's that to you?
So what's interesting to me is transformation is a huge thing for me. I'm really interested in how we go from one state to another state, like how we transform. And part of that is like neuroplasticity means every single interaction that we have changes us a little bit, but there seem to be these sort of state changes that seem that there's like, it's like a flip that it's like, I'm really not the same as I was before. And so for me, when we're talking about transformative, that's what we're talking about. And when we talk about leadership, we're talking about, so here's one of the things that's interesting is that the definition of leadership changes as you go through transformative processes around leadership. But so leadership is something in this space of stepping forward into getting something done. And
okay,
like there's something about leadership that is about a role, an embodiment, and there's something about leadership that is about forward momentum, or at least about momentum. And there's something about sort of leadership and followership.
Sorry, I was about to interrupt you, and I stopped myself.
And so to me, transformative is like, what is the step change? And leadership is in this like forward momentum towards goals. And then training is about like, how do we get better at stuff?
Because, and the thing that popped into my head as you were talking about transformative leadership and sort of that step change. and this is I'm drawing from my own experience of being a leader and where I think that transformative step change happened for me. Um, the word that popped in my head was motivation, and like my personal motivation for wanting to step into a leadership role. And and I'm going to admit a bunch of stuff that I wasn't planning to admit, but like when I think of my early career in corporate leadership, my motivation was, and I didn't think there was anything wrong with it, and I still don't think there's anything wrong with it necessarily. But my motivation was personal. I'm going to say the word enrichment, but it wasn't about making money, right? It was status. It was moving the career and following success the way that it had been defined for me, right? Like, so move up and to the right is the way that I describe it, right? More money, better title, more money, better title, more money, better title. And that works until it doesn't work, or at least for me, it worked until it didn't work. And if I look back on it now, I would say it worked until it didn't work, and I wish that it had stopped working much earlier than it had actually stopped working, because my ability to sort of force myself through that was pretty legion.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we talked about a little bit before we were on camera is how when you hit these step change moments, there's a like, open up the door. Oh my goodness, something else is different. Like, it's possible different. I can't unsee what I've just seen. And then there's this process of implementation and this sort of continuing improvement in this new side of the step change. And so this thing about, I wish I'd gotten there earlier, is really, really powerful. There's a part of me that is like, we need to do more of this for children way younger than we think we do. And it's so interesting to me because my motivation was never status. My motivation was always impact. And I had leadership roles from the time I was 10 or 11. And so I got my early leadership training way before the idea of corporate leadership was the realm. And my early leadership training was in theater.
Oh, wow.
Working with volunteers. And what you learn as a leader working with volunteers, and particularly what you learn as an 11-year-old working with 55-year-old and 60-year-old volunteers, is very, very different than what you learn in a traditional career path kind of model of learning leadership.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So here's the thing that I think, I have an urge to go in this particular direction, because I think that there's something about sort of identifying that step change. And I want to call out this comment that Kanat has given us as well, right? Transformation reminds me of different states of matter.
Yes.
And right. And there's something, Kanat, like, when you say that, like, the word alchemy pops into my head, right? Like, there's something is magic. and I think, Kate, what do you think? Like, would it be helpful to sort of say, like, when was the first step change? Like, when did that happen? Is that too personal? Is that something you'd like to?
No, I'm happy to. I think that I want to sort of tap on the theory just a little bit before I go to the storytelling. When people talk about the sort of stages of development in adult vertical development theory, they have a couple of things that they talk about. They talk about like a peak experience, where you get an experience that's above where your basic level of development is. And then they talk about fallback, which is under stress, we all revert to our level of deep training and our level of fear-based things. And so the idea of sort of step changes is actually that whatever level we're at, we have sort of a center of gravity.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really important when we start telling these stories, because the stories that we've lived are these stories
Mm-hmm.
of peak experience, center of gravity, fall back, center of gravity, fall back,
Yep.
center of gravity. And so I think that as we go into the stories, like these are the kinds of things.
Yep.
So I was thinking about this as we were preparing for this conversation, and my first lessons in leadership
Mm-hmm.
came from being a follower to my parents and teachers, which I suspect is how most of us learn our first lessons about leadership, is the assumptions that we're making based on being followers.
Mm-hmm.
And the traditional sort of look at personality development suggests that the first thing that happens is that we conform to our primary caregivers. And that's the first things. And I'm a third culture child. Between the ages of 4 and 6, I bounced back and forth between England and the United States several times.
Okay.
And so I got 2 different sets of teacher training and a difference between the what I was getting from my parents and what I was getting from my schools, because they had come from different worlds when I was in the United States. So my very first leadership training from an implicit level was there is more than one way of being in the world, and you need to figure out how to navigate complexity.
So what's so interesting, because I want to call out something that Thomas has given you a shout out about the volunteers before, but it's this most recent comment that I want to call out, because he said we don't rise to the level of our potential so often as we fall to the level of our training. And when you're talking about here's sort of the implicit training, I think that's the term that we used before camera, right? I think that's what you're describing, and there's an opportunity to sort of you had this opportunity because of, what did you call it? Third culture?
Third culture, yeah. So third culture child is like where the parental tradition and the cultural tradition from the society around you don't match.
Are different. Got it. Yeah. Okay.
And so you as an individual already have to start making leadership choices about what you stand for.
Very early.
Very early, because you can't make both masters happy.
I'm glad that you're the one I'm having this conversation with. And Thomas, thank you so much for that comment.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas. Yeah, and Thomas's point about working with volunteers, you have positional power, is really, really important, because the very first so this parent-child implicit learning about leadership, the child is dependent on the parent, so the parents can get away with telling the children what to do.
Right. Positional power.
Right. And if you've got positional power in an organization, right, if somebody is depending on this job for a paycheck, you can tell them
the people that report to me, the people that report to the people that report to me.
You can tell them what to do in a way that takes you don't need to require to respect
authority-based leadership.
You don't need to respect them as human beings. You don't need to actually treat them decently at all. You can just tell them what to do. Yeah.
Yep. And a lot of my early leadership was exactly like that.
My early leadership was, as I said, leading volunteers who were much older than I was. So literally, I'm here going like, okay, so we need to slide the piece of paper in the program, and if you can stand on that aisle and you can stand on that aisle. But I'm here being like, the only reason I have any authority is because my mom runs the box office.
Yep. Influence without authority is in project management school. That's what they used to call it, right? It's exerting influence without authority. Although at the same time, that's I'm going to put that. That was an aside.
Okay,
we don't need to talk about project management. So, step change.
Yeah, so you had a step change. I mean, you talk about you started with this sort of telling people what to do piece, and what happened?
So I'll think in a nutshell. It was the first time that I had a leadership position, and it wasn't that long ago. It was like just over a decade. I think that I was a pretty good leader, and I was sort of going the right direction before that. But about a decade and a half ago, when I first started working at a big Canadian bank, And I was asked to lead a team of business analysts. And if you know anything about me, what you know is that I've never been a business analyst. I know that it's important. I've worked with lots of them, and I think that it's great work. But don't ask me to be a business analyst, because I think I'd do a terrible job and it'd be really boring. And this team was they were perceived to be underperforming, and they needed a leader to come and create a high performing team, which I didn't know what that was. So I just sort of thought, well, what would I want? Like, what if I just did, instead of trying to figure out what it was, and like this, the step change was I had to lead people in a discipline where I had no context. So I had to do something else.
Yes. So what I love about this is how often this is the transformative moment.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes a transformative moment is that we have this peak experience that sort of spontaneously comes out of nowhere, and we get this sort of aha moment, and we believe, and all of a sudden something is possible in our imagination that wasn't before. I had this when I was doing coach training, and I watched a master coach someone through a panic attack, and all of a sudden my belief about what coaching was capable of doing just blew wide open. Yep. And I want to be able to do that. But just as often, the moment that drives development is the moment where we have tried everything that we can think of and it's just not working, and we throw up our hands and go, there's gotta be something else.
There was one other element to that experience, though, that was really important. And it may be because, I had come from another job where it was very command and control. I was put in a position where I had to let people go that I didn't want to let go. It was not a good situation for a growing leader. But the thing that I decided in this team of quote unquote underperforming business analysts was that this is not business language, but I'm going to say it, like, I'm going to fall in love with them. Because if I could do that, like if I could really care about what happened to them as individuals, then all of a sudden something became possible. And it's like, I couldn't care about the quality of their work because I couldn't evaluate it. So I had to care about something else.
Yeah.
I didn't know that was going to come up. When we imagined having this conversation, I did not think that was going to come up, but there we go. Thomas has given us another. I'm not going to read it. I'm going to call it up on the screen. So the lack of detailed domain knowledge snatches away a support. Yep. You can't second guess the workers in the same way. You suddenly need to engage in different conversations. Thank you, Thomas. 100%. 100%. And it's weird. And it feels weird if you're not used to doing it.
And it is, if you're not used to dealing with it, particularly if you're coming out of a like command and control, tell people what to do kind of model, a kind of control model of leadership. When you can't do the job and can't mentor people and can't assess, the sense of being out of control that you first hit when you try and land in that way of working is massively destabilizing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you need to learn other ways of getting your sense of I'm in control enough to feel safe.
This might be a good moment for us to go to the very last word in our title. And let's start talking about training. Yeah.
Yes.
Like what's, yeah. Because I think there's a hunger for it. There's a hunger for it. People want leadership training, right? In a nutshell, I think that there's a lot of people that think that that's what they're getting when they go and get their MBA. If you had asked me 20 years ago, like, what would make you a good leader? I would say, I'll go get an MBA.
Yeah. Whereas if you'd asked me 20 years ago about what would make me a good leader, I would have been like, why the hell do I want to be a leader?
Fair.
But yeah, so I mean, training is really interesting because there's transformative development and then there's like technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I have been asked to develop training programs in organizations, one of the most common things is people think that what they want are technical skills. And
Yeah.
honestly, I'm like, if you have a deadline, you need to work back from it. And if you don't have a deadline, then you need to decide what criteria you're going to use for deciding it's done, because work expands to fit the time available. And so you either need a criteria of done or you need a deadline, or you never ship. And sort of those kinds of project management skills that are actually about, do you know how to create an agenda? And do you know, they're actually very, very simple.
Well, and they're tactical.
And they're very tactical.
And I would argue that they're important skills for a leader to have. And I had those skills long before I called myself a leader.
Yeah, they're necessary, but not sufficient.
Right. Yes. Thank you. That's you just pulled that right out of my head. Yep.
Yeah. And this piece of what is it to be a person who has a vision that they're enrolling other people into saying, yes, I want to be part of the team, and then facilitating the conversations that are an iterative process between we do a thing, we come back and plan, we see where we've come to, we notice what things have gone wrong, we notice what things went better than expected. And so what happened? How can we get more of that? How do we become the kind of person that just gets in there and dances with this as it goes forward from a place of, I'm part of the inspiration and the enrollment process for getting other people to go in the direction. How do we get there is huge. And I know you and I have both done the coactive leadership program, which is very much designed to teach a way of doing that in partnership. And so that's one of the things that we've got in common. But I'm curious sort of what other places you've learned part of how to do this stuff.
Well, some of it, and we talked about this before camera, but some of it's been sort of the school of hard knocks. And I think, like implicit training, I've done some, and I've done some that I've loved. And, some of it's been around people change management. And what I'll say is that all the good stuff has been about, creating relationships and focusing on individual, like on people rather than on tasks. But I want to call out also this comment that Mark has given us, right? Because I think it speaks to some of that too. And I, full disclosure, Mark is one of those people that I learned some of the implicit leadership from. So thank you for that, Mark. But, leaders lack behavior and process when they get promoted. I certainly experienced that. And I was working with Mark at the time when he experienced me experiencing that. Training can close the gap for leaders promoted to running teams that impact other lives. Massive gap in our country. I don't think it's just in our country, Mark. I think it's actually just in society in general. It's the way that we are taught what leadership is. So to answer your question, Kate, by watching other people who had figured some of this stuff out, I started to become curious about what it was. I think the next step change for me was learning coaching, and again, from Coactive, and realizing that a lot of sort of the stuff that I was applying in other places, falling in love with a team of people that I didn't know what their work was, taking that energy and realizing, oh, you know what, I can apply it here. What's that like? I've never done that before. And then that became something, sort of astonishing. And I experienced what you experienced. Thank you, Mark. Yeah. Let me just put that up. Thank you, Mark.
And I think one of the things that's interesting here is the relationship between learning through doing and then learning through training is actually symbiotic. Some of the most dysfunctional leadership I have experienced is from people who've read all of the books, but haven't been supported in applying the information in a way that actually gets their internal wiring, because this stuff is embodied. Because when you go into a high stakes meeting, you do not have time to sit here and go, okay, what are my values and how am I reacting to this? And what are the 6 pieces in the puzzle? And what it has to be habitual.
Yep. And it has to happen before.
It has to happen before. And so, but you don't know you need it until you failed, and you don't know what's possible until you've seen examples of it. And so it's this really complex and dynamic process. And so when I think about my stories, I had a teacher I had him for 7th and 8th grade. So I don't know whether it was 7th or 8th grade, in which he said something that basically was, there are standards that the school has about giving you a grade, and there are standards that you have about quality work. Your standards are higher. Don't let the school hold you back.
Awesome. So good.
Yeah. And that changed my relationship to education for the rest of my life. I no longer from that moment on, I took every training as what are my standards and what am I trying to get out of this, rather than what are they trying to teach me. So that was a huge leadership moment from him. And I learned the power of that distinction. Whose standards are you following? Like, whose values? What is the goal? Like, as a way of goal setting, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that I had a couple of dance teachers who were so skilled at seeing where the students were in September and knowing how difficult the choreography for the concert could be in May if we started rehearsing in September.
Wow.
And my father, right? Like, it's a huge, what is vision about what is possible, and a sense of what do we know about training and that sort of thing. And my parents pointed out that this was a skill that they had. So then I, as a director of theater, started watching auditions for what was possible 8 weeks from now, rather than what people were doing in the thing. So I was getting that training that I was then able to implement. And so that dance between getting the teaching and then playing it out in practice and figuring out what's working is so important.
It really is. And I think it speaks to the importance of the trainer and the capabilities of the trainer within the context of leadership training, doesn't it?
Yes. People cannot learn to, it's the parenting thing about do what I say, not what I do, doesn't work. The thing that people learn the most is what we do and who we are. And so if we're going to do this work, we have to have done this work. Like, if we're going to train in the space, we have to.
That's the mic drop. If you're going to do this work, you have to have done this work.
Yeah.
And I agree with you 100%. Listen,
I'm seeing Thomas's comment about, after having read all the books, becoming a toxic boss. That's a huge admission right there. And it's so easy to do. So easy to do.
Yeah. Same. And I appreciate, and thank you, Thomas, for that. Because it's really, it's important, right? This isn't something you can learn from a book. And I know, because I tried to learn it from a book for a long time. Not that there aren't good books. There are good books. But that's not where to stop.
But it's not just the books. The coactive program is experiential. It's just one of the things that is really, really powerful about that program. And I've been seeking out programs with experiential components since I was about 17, because coming up as a dancer and an actor and a director, the experiential was just in my body of this is how you learn.
Exactly.
And so for people who are looking for training, if it's just an information content and doesn't have an implementation or a experiential component, it's only going to get you information. It's not going to get
Mhm.
you the practice.
You won't feel it here.
You don't feel it here.
Yeah, you won't
But
feel it
when
here.
I came out of the coactive program,
Mhm.
the coactive program gave me language and
Mhm.
a framework for stuff I already knew, which was actually incredibly grounding
Mhm.
because it made me feel like I wasn't crazy, that I
Mhm.
had all of this embodied knowing. And like, actually, it was like, okay, I've got some language to talk about this
Yeah.
now. And it
Yeah.
actually spurred me to go and read all the books so that I had language to talk about what I knew in my body but couldn't articulate.
I understand.
And when I was first starting to get that language, I was obnoxious.
What happened?
I was
What
obnoxious.
happened?
You need to know this. I'm going to tell you what you should know.
Yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
Kate, I feel like I've been talking to you for 5 minutes, but it's been 30.
Oh my goodness. Here we
Yeah, I
are.
know. I think that we could keep going, and maybe we should, because I think there's more to talk about. There's more things that are in this space. But it's one of the things about having a live show rather than an edited one. So let's wrap this up. I think we're going to have to. What's last words? What needs to be said?
What needs to be said? Development is hard. Leadership is hard. Training is this mix of intellectual and experiential, and
Mm-hmm.
find the people who've already gone it that you can see who are ahead of you when you're feeling lost.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the only thing that's ever worked for me.
It's been transformative for me. And you can find those people in sometimes the most unexpected of places. Just be looking, because it's worth it. It's so worth it.
Yeah. And there's something to be learned from everywhere.
Yeah.
Even when the people aren't ahead of you, there's something to be learned.
Indeed. So, Kate, I know that we had some book recommendations. We're going to put those into the show notes so that we can wrap up. But if people want to get a hold of you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Kate at signalfirecoaching.com.
Actually, we'll put that link in the show notes as well. Kate at signalfirecoaching.com. And sorry, I interrupted you. There was more.
The other thing is katearms.com is my coaching website. So
katearms.com.
That one's easier to spell.
Okay, so we'll put all that into the comments on LinkedIn, and of course you're there on LinkedIn. I'm assuming it's okay if folks just reach out to you there as well. Fantastic. And me too. I'm on LinkedIn. You can reach me there or at toddkarges.com. It's my name and .com. And that's our show today. That's the Leadership Studio on leadership training. Thank you so much for being here. I love spending time with you, Kate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Todd.
Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna end this, and thank you everyone for showing up. Thank you, Thomas, Mark, Kanat, for your comments. Really, so much appreciate. We'll try that again. So much appreciation for your participation. Thank you.